Greetings everyone and welcome back to the Dungeon Inn. I'm the Innkeeper. So the last couple of videos have been kind of dense, to put things lightly. All this high concept philosophical talk about morality and the nature of being, and it's a lot, so I kind of just needed a topic that was nice and chill. You know, something easy that I don't have to put too much thought into. So let's talk about death. Death in the Afterlife in Dungeons & Dragons isn't really something that's dealt with in the core books, mainly because it's more of a setting and world-building question than it is a rules question. But even in the setting-specific books, they haven't exactly dealt with the issue. In both Eberron Rising from the Last War and the Sword Coast Adventurer's Guide, there is only a single paragraph in the entire book that deals with what happens to characters when they die. And I kind of feel like this is an oversight or a missed opportunity because what happens to a character in death kind of defines what they do in their life. So this video is going to be a thorough exploration of death and the afterlife in the multiverse of Dungeons & Dragons. Of course, this video is only going to be strictly relevant if you are playing in an official D&D setting or campaign, but even if you're not, a lot of the ideas and thought processes I'm going to talk about will hopefully help you build your own afterlife in your own D&D world. And of course, you might disagree with what the canonical interpretation of the afterlife is, because I'm telling you now, it doesn't work the way that you think it does. Because all of the official D&D settings take place within the same wider multiverse, it means that they all obey basically the same process of death and the afterlife. Except for Eberron, because it wants to be a special snowflake and exists in its own little isolated marble bubble thing. Firstly, when a creature dies, its soul leaves its body and goes somewhere else. In Eberron, that's the plane of Dolor, because it, as I said, it needs to be special. But for every other setting, then the soul goes to the outer planes of the multiverse. Once in the multiverse, the soul goes to the plane that best corresponds to its alignment in life, which means a good aligned soul will go to the upper planes and live in paradise, while a evil aligned soul will go down to the lower planes and suffer for all eternity. And that's pretty clearly like a heaven-hell dichotomy, right? That's really all you need to know. But it's not, because when you start to actually think about it for more than a couple of seconds, some pretty glaring holes start to pop up in that basic explanation. How do you judge a character's alignment? Is it a god or some invisible force? And if it is a god, are they fallible? How do you know that they're going to judge you accurately? Why would you ever be evil if you know for 100% certainty that you're going down to hell when you die for doing it? To examine these ideas fully, we're going to take a look at the journey that a soul takes from the moment of its death all the way until its inevitable final demise. The Ranger Feroz and his noble pet Scoobs have unfortunately died during a fight with a red dragon. Now their party is standing over them, lamenting what they could have done if only the Ranger hadn't rolled that nat 1. But if the party is at least a 5th level and has a cleric, then you've got some options. Revival magic works in tiers in 5th edition, starting at 3rd level and going up every 2nd level from there. Each progressive tier of spell reduces the requirements and restrictions on trying to raise a creature back from the dead. For example, it increases the amount of time the creature can be dead for, or removes the need to have a part of the creature's body. But more powerful magic comes with more punishing drawbacks. Revivify is the quickest, but also the most limited form of revival magic. It can get an ally up instantly like that, even in the middle of combat, which no other revival spell can do. But the creature can't have been dead for more than a minute, so it's pretty useless to you outside of that spur of the moment decision. New players may not know this, but Revivify was actually a bit of a controversial spell during 5e's playtest, and even to this day. Previously, clerics got access to Raise Dead at 5th level, which had a cost of 5,000 GP versus Revivify's 300, but also took an hour to cast and had worse detriments than even the 5th edition version. So introducing a spell that was quicker, had less drawbacks, and cost less was kind of like trivializing death to a lot of players. Revivify, for all intents and purposes, is kind of just like another form of healing magic now. As I said before, Revivify can't work if the creature has been dead for more than a minute or it is missing any body parts, so there's no point trying to bring back your paladin that got stabbed through the chest by the spiked tail of the dragon. Actually, it does work technically as long as you've still got the main body if they're missing any body parts or have grievous injuries, but as soon as you bring them back, they're just going to die again. It doesn't heal them at all. Essentially, Revivify is just cheap and dirty revival magic, but I cannot overstate how, despite that, Revivify is incredibly potent. Like, let's compare it, a 3rd level spell, to another 3rd level spell. Sending. Sending allows you to send one message of 25 words or less to any other creature anywhere in the multiverse, but even if you do that, it's still got a 5% chance of failing. Do you think it's logically consistent then for a spell of the same level to be able to pull back a whole soul from elsewhere in the multiverse? I don't, and this bit is purely conjecture, but I believe that Revivify works the way it does because the creature's soul hasn't yet left its body for that 1 minute. There are stories of people being brought back from being clinically dead for long after a minute, so I'd argue that all Revivify has to do, if the soul is still in the body, is just jack it with a surge of magical evocation energy in order to revitalize it or reignite that spark. The soul hasn't yet disassociated from the body, so it doesn't require anywhere near as much magic as to pull it back from elsewhere in the multiverse. But after that minute passes, that's when it finishes disassociating and goes on its journey. So let's say that our Ranger Firos wasn't able to be revived after a minute for whatever reason, and then his partner, Scoobs, died of heartache, the poor thing. So now both their souls leave their bodies and begin their journey into the multiverse proper. A soul, once it has entered the multiverse and started its journey, is known as a petitioner, because Planescape is weird like that. The soul then finds itself in the astral plane, which it then travels through in order to reach its final destination in the outer planes. The astral plane is one of the two transitory planes in the D&D multiverse. It is the plane of thoughts and ideas, the connective tissue upon which all of the other outer planes in all their grand philosophical ponderings rest on. The astral plane is a huge silvery sea that is for the most part totally empty and hauntingly beautiful. As you're travelling through it, you might find some ruins of a long-lost civilization, or be lashed with rampant psychic winds that fill your mind with memories you had forgotten or thoughts that aren't your own. It is the realm of thoughts and dreams. But where do they come from? The answer is dead souls. As a dead soul or petitioner travels through the astral plane, its memories are being absorbed by the plane itself. Those psychic winds that I mentioned that filled your mind with thoughts that weren't your own, those are the lost and broken thoughts of other dead creatures as they have moved on into the afterlife. The end result of this is by the time the soul has made it to its end destination in the outer planes, it has lost all of its memories that made it who it was. That soul is no longer the same creature that died. It retains its personality, and I'm not going to go into the whole metaphysics of how a soul can maintain its personality without having the memories that form the foundation of that personality. That's just not a discussion I want to go into. But the point is that your character's soul, by the time it reaches the outer planes, is a functionally different but similar but distinct entity to the one that died on the material plane. It isn't known how long a creature's soul travels through the astral plane in order to get to the outer planes, but I like to think canonically in my worlds that it is 10 days, because that is the time limit for revival of the 5th level Raised Dead spell. Again, this bit is more my own headcanon rather than actual official lore, but I like to think that as the soul is traveling through the astral plane, it is reliving all of its memories as they are being drained from its body. It is maybe only semi-conscious of its surroundings and instead caught up in its rampant thoughts, maybe reflecting on its actions and choices that it made when it was in life. So if the creature is brought back to life through the Raised Dead spell during this time, perhaps they have come to a new realization about life and the choices that they have made after looking at everything they've done in their life in perspective. But assuming they don't get hit with that Raised Dead spell, the soul then finds itself in the outer plane that most corresponds to its alignment in life. And this is judged not by a specific god, but by the laws of the multiverse itself. A soul trying to stop itself or change its destination is akin to us trying to fly. What happens to a petitioner when they reach their final destination varies on plane to plane. Generally, if you go to any of the lower planes, you're going to be reincarnated into either a maggot or a soul larva or a mains. Or if you're in the upper planes, you might become a lantern archon. If you're lawful neutral, you'll go to mechanist and you'll become a rigid, law-abiding, heightened form of yourself. Again, without your memories, though, it's kind of like a representation of you in your most lawful form. Whether if you're chaotic neutral, then you'll go to limbo. And in limbo, the petitioner's mind is pretty much instantly swept away in the chaos of the plane. They immediately lose everything that they once were, and if they're somehow strong enough to survive that, then they just become some insane, gibbering force of nature that plagues other people traveling the plane. But regardless of where you go, when you are reincarnated into your plane as a petitioner, you are fundamentally a different creature to when you were on the material plane. Even if your party could go to the outer planes, embark on a great epic journey to find you and bring you back, they'll meet you and might find that you've taken on a new name, you've started a new life. It's the ship of Theseus problem. If a ship pulled up to a dock and then gradually over the course of a year, every part of it was stripped away and replaced so that by the end of that year, no part of it was the same, not a single bolt or rivet was the same as it was when it first docked. It is no longer physically the same ship, it is objectively different, but yet it is still called the ship of Theseus. If Firos the petitioner has still technically the same soul as Firos the character, but they no longer identify themselves as Firos and have different experiences and no longer the same memories, are they still technically Phiros? And I know what you're thinking. That's kind of shit, right? The Phiros who is up there reaping the rewards in the heavens is a different Phiros to the one who actually put in all the hard work of being good in life. Likewise, you could be as morally corrupt as you want during your life, because when you go down to hell, you're not even going to remember the life you led. You were a different person. Some other new person created just for the purpose of torture is being tortured as a soul lava. This is known as transience of identity, and it is a big problem for metaphysical philosophers. However, I believe we can explain it for our purposes here by drawing a distinction between a soul and its independent identities. Imagine a ball of clay. That clay can be shaped into many different forms over the course of its existence. However, it cannot have more than one form at the same time. It cannot simultaneously be shaped like an elephant and a human. No matter its shape, it is still fundamentally the same ball of clay, simply displaying different external properties. I'd argue a creature's soul is the same. It may take the form of Phiros at time t1 while on the material plane, and then could transform into Petitioner Phiros at time t2, and then back into Material Phiros at time t3 if he is revived by his party. This explains how a single soul can change over time and have multiple identities, but it doesn't help us with the problem of justice. Petitioner Phiros at time t2 is still benefiting from or being punished for the actions of Material Phiros at t1, who no longer exists. And how is that fair? The good aren't rewarded and the evil aren't punished. And this is part of why I find the Planescape setting so interesting, because it dares to challenge our preconceived notions of how morality in the universe works. But anyway, for Phiros, who is a chaotic good ranger, he would go to the plane of, say, Arborea, where he can drink and be free and happy for the rest of his life. Well, at least the Petitioner version of him can. Sometimes this is different, like all elves go to the domain of Corellian Latharian, their creator deity, where they are then reincarnated into a new elf. But for the most part, assuming you don't have any like racial ties or anything, then you are just going to go to the outer plane that corresponds to your alignment. But I also use the example of Phiros as a ranger for a particular reason, and that's because he's got an animal companion, Scoobs. The adorably, weirdly intelligent panther that has each individually spoken actual human words to every single member of the party, but never two of them at the same time. And all the party members are too awkward to bring up with each other, hey man, your panther kind of talked to us. And so his soul also went through the process of going to the astral plane, wasn't revived, blah, 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 blah. The difference is that Scoobs as an animal is unaligned, which means that he doesn't have a plane of existence to go to. In D&D, all living creatures have souls, it's just that some aren't valued as highly as others. Essentially, the stronger the conviction of the creature in their life, the more powerful their soul is, because they truly believe in their ideals. And belief is the most powerful force in the multiverse. So the soul of a noble paladin is far more valuable to any creature, be it celestial or devil, than the soul of the chaotic evil rogue who was just selfish. Likewise, animals like Scoobs have souls, but because they don't have the capability for rational moral thought, they're just kind of worthless to a lot of beings. And there's no canonical answer to what an unaligned soul does, so I believe that all unaligned beast souls go to the Beastlands, because, you know, the names are the same. And it means that your puppy Biscuits, who was accidentally run over by a cart, did actually go to a happy farm in the sky, which is nice. But even for Petitioner, Phiros and Scoobs, this paradise they live in is only for a time. It's not stated how long it takes, but the longer a Petitioner spends on their plane of existence, the more the essence breaks apart and is absorbed into that plane in turn, just like how the astral plane absorbed their memories. And eventually, they just become pure energy. They break apart and become one with the multiverse that birthed them. Sources from 2nd edition describe how, as a soul becomes one with their plane of existence, they come to an existential realization about their life, their powers, and their place in the multiverse. It is only once a Petitioner experiences this realization that they are fully absorbed by the plane, and ascend to a new form of life that is indistinct from the plane itself. The soul isn't destroyed, but instead births some new landscape or notable feature of the plane. The Petitioner's identity is lost, but the soul lives on. Hence why a soul can always be revived by means of the wish spell no matter how much time has passed. This idea has clearly drawn inspiration from Buddhist teachings. Buddhism believes that the final goal of all souls should be to reach a state of union with the universe called nirvana that allows us to be free of the cycle of reincarnation and rebirth known as samsara. Parallels between the planes of the multiverse can be drawn with the planes of existence according to Buddhist teachings. This is why no justice exists within this system. It rejects the binary notion of good and evil that Western philosophy has been so focused on for centuries. And again, I like to think that this process takes around 100 years because that is the time limit of our next tier of resurrection magic, resurrection. After those 100 years have passed, you need some really powerful magic to not only drag kicking and screaming the petitioner out of the essence of the plane itself, but you have to gather all of that petitioner's lost memories scattered all throughout the astral plane and rebuild them all together, as well as rebuild the body, because that sure as shit hasn't lasted 100 years. And this is why revival magic scales in the way it does, because at each stage it becomes progressively harder to track down and gather all the bits of your soul that have been scattered throughout the multiverse. But fear not, because there is one way to ensure that you are going to remain you, the same as you were on the material plane in the afterlife, your memories and all, and that is to promise your soul to a more powerful being. I don't mean selling your soul necessarily, although that is one way to go about it. I mean promising your soul to a god or some other being who has a use for you in the afterlife. This way, instead of travelling to the outer plane that corresponds to your alignment, your soul travels instead to the dominion of your patron or god. And then from there, they decide personally what to do with you. If you have completed your end of the bargain, or you have served your deity dutifully, then generally they'll reward you by allowing to keep your memories and your personhood, your identity, even in death. You will just be indebted to them for the rest of eternity. But that is the only way for you as your character, not you as a petitioner, but you as your independent character, to experience the afterlife. And it is for this reason alone that so many characters in the Forgotten Realms and other canonical D&D settings are religious. It's the only way to ensure that you experience a reward for the good things you do in life, or even just to not face oblivion. But it also means that if you're evil, you may as well just worship an evil god or sell your soul to the devil. Because like, sure, you'll be indebted to them and working for them for the rest of your life, but there's plenty of gods out there. Just pick one that allows you to do what you want to do anyway. And this is the trump card I played in my Descent into Avernus campaign. Because see, my party is mostly evil characters, some of them neutral, in fact more of them are transitioned to neutral as they've been travelling, becoming less purely selfish and more selfish, but also acknowledge the value that the rest of the party members have, because that's how you run an evil party in D&D. So when they got to the Wandering Impreium and met the merchant Marty, and he explained to them how the afterlife actually works, and the future they were going to face if they continued down the path that they were, suddenly making deals with devils, which is what they had been avoiding for the entire campaign. In fact, some of their backstories were based around trying to get out of devil deals they had been locked into, didn't actually seem so bad. Sure, you'll be in service to an evil being, but if you're a devil, you can work your way up the infernal hierarchy. And importantly, you are still you. Bringing this all back just to an everyday campaign though, this system does have ramifications for bringing a character back to life. Because if a character's memories separate from their soul when they become a petitioner, then when their party tries to bring them back, they need to be willing to return to their body. But if they can't remember what they were doing and then they're up in heaven enjoying themselves, they really have no reason to return back and complete their quests. They can't remember who their friends are or even what they were doing. Sure, if you're an evil character and you're a soul lava and you've experienced how shit that is, if someone tries to bring you back to life, you're likely going to be all for that, so you can at least start worshipping an evil god or make a deal with the devil, or maybe even atone for the evil things that you did and start life anew. But good characters don't really have that incentive. Their petitioner forms have gotten their reward, and they've got no incentive to return to where they were. I'm going to explore the reasons behind this in a bit more detail in my last morality video on the metaphysics of morality in D&D, but essentially the reasons for this can be traced back to D&D's wargaming roots, where back in its early days, you weren't really ever meant to get a character back. Losing a character meant that you were a bad player, and so revival magic was kind of just cheating the game. So the system was almost set up to discourage characters from ever coming back once they had died. But of course, the hobby has evolved a lot since then, and no longer do you play multiple characters cycling through them as they die to insta-kill traps in a dungeon. Now when you make a character, it's expected that that character is going to stick around for the entirety of that campaign, and you're going to build an immense emotional connection to them over that time. So to have this form of the afterlife, where they aren't rewarded nor punished, it kind of just feels shit. And if you don't like that, I totally get it. I personally run it so that the common knowledge in my world is that If you're a good person, you go to the upper planes and it's nice, it's good, you get rewarded. And if you go to the lower planes, then you're punished. Because I think it's unrealistic for the common person to have this grand understanding of how the metaphysics of the planes work and what happens in the afterlife. They can all have their individual beliefs, of course, but the general consensus is just, you be good, you get good. You be bad, you get bad. And it's only certain wizards, planar creatures, and scholars that truly understand how the multiverse works. And for most campaigns, that's just enough. You don't need any more than that. And that's basically it. That's how the afterlife works in Dungeons & Dragons. You die, your memories separate from your soul, and you become a petitioner, then you go to the outer planes, and eventually absorbed into oblivion as a part of that plane in the multiverse. Or you worship a god, or sell your soul to a devil, in which case you work for that being for the rest of eternity until they are kind enough to set you free. I'm kind of starting to see where liches are coming from now. Now, each setting has minor variations on this system. For example, in the Forgotten Realms, instead of just going straight to the outer planes and having the multiverse judge you, you are judged by the god of dead Kelemvor, and you go to his realm on the Fugue plane and his City of Judgment. There he judges your actions and sends you to the relevant plane depending on your alignment. But it's even more deity-centric, because if you didn't worship a god, then instead of being sent to the outer planes, even if you were a good or evil person, you're instead shoved into the Wall of the Faithless, which is just this huge screaming wall of souls. And if you worshipped a god or made a paladin oath and then broke that oath, and then in Eberron your soul goes to like your specific little special Eberron plane bubble, but after the soul fades from that plane, they don't really know where it goes. And of course, if you don't like these systems, then you don't have to use them. As much as I love Planescape, I actually do like this version of the afterlife. I actually think it's really interesting, hence doing an entire video on it. It's not what I did in my homebrew world. In my homebrew world of Divara, souls travel down this long river of death, and at the end of that, they are converted into primal magic and then rejoin the essence of the world. And that idea of all energy eventually being recycled back into the earth itself and all creatures being a part of one circle of life, it underpins all of the native cultures of my world. They all have this holistic approach to life and nature and magic. In the end, you can do whatever you want with death and the afterlife in your world. You just need to know two key things. One, how it is viewed by the people of your world, because how they react to it is going to determine the cultures and societies of your world. As I said, if they know what they have to do in order to reach heaven or hell, then they are going to do those things and you're going to end up with a lot more of a certain kind of behavior. And secondly, you need to know how it works from a metaphysical and mechanical level and how those two things intertwine themselves together. Thank you for watching this video, I hope you enjoyed it, and we are back to our usual schedule of intense, philosophical ponderings and mind-melting metaphysics in the next video. Don't forget to like the video to show that you enjoyed it, and of course subscribe if you aren't already, so that way you get updates whenever I upload. Oh wait, ring the bell icon for that as well. Check out my stuff on the Dungeon Masters Guild, I'm pumping out a whole bunch of that at the moment. And if you really want to support me, head over to Patreon where you can get access to scripts for videos before the video actually comes out, get access to playtest and beta material, draft material for my publications, I don't know, and other things like bloopers and stuff whenever I feel like putting it up there. As always, thank you to my current patrons, Ashley Howard and Britt Bradford, for continuing to support me. And yeah, that's about it. So I'm Drew, I'm the Innkeeper, and I hope you enjoyed your stay here at the Dungeon Inn.